I
Yeah.
will.
Well, and I actually, it's funny because I had asked Deb about having this meeting, and then I had it on my calendar. I was ready to go, and then I got involved in something else. But I don't know what you've been doing there, but it's just a mess. I mean, I'll tell you what's probably gone the best in in the last 6 months is I taught a confirmation class about a month ago, and I went in and I used AI to develop a lesson plan. It was really good. It was really good. That's something new that I haven't really done before. A whole lot. I mean, I've probably the last year I've used it a little bit, but I don't know, Chris, if you've done any stuff with um, the one that I've been using is Claude. I don't know if you're, we went to this, there was this communications workshop that the Synod put on. Did you go to that, Deb?
No, I didn't, but I knew
Um,
about it.
about, let me think, beginning of February maybe. And that was one of the things that they suggested was they were saying about different AI platforms. And I had used Chat GPT a little bit and it was fun. It was kind of interesting, but they suggested this one called Claude, and um, I there's a free version, and then I signed up for 1 month of a paid version. It was like $15 just to kind of see the next steps because it'll help you for a while, and then it'll say um, if you want to if you want to keep doing this you can check back in like 12 hours and you'll have more time on it.
Mhm.
And so I was like, no, I'm just going to see. I'm just going to keep going with it. But it it really did a great job of like when you put in all the information, I said what size my group was, how it's a young middle school group. Post COVID, they're all weird. And they can't sit still. Not that any middle schoolers can, but like I put in all these parameters, and then the thing that they taught us at that communications workshop was to say, ask me clarifying questions. And so then the AI would come back and say, okay, so you say you've got this. What about how do how do you like it structured and all this? And I mean, I spent a good bit of time with the platform, but it spit out this really comprehensive um, lesson plan that worked. Like be like saying active, like I wanted active things. I wanted they can't sit and listen.
Mhm.
I said I'm ELCA, Lutheran ELCA congregation. Um, I don't know. It honestly,
Yeah.
that's the best luck I've had. And I've done that since Deb and I talked, I think. So because there's not any good curriculum unless you found some. I mean, do you have anything you like, Chris? Or
Not um not anything I love. Like I do a lot of borrowing and tweaking just
yeah,
because um I know I pull from lots of different resources just that I've kind of gathered through time. Um so it is interesting to just kind of figure out kind of um what works and what doesn't work. And then you also kind of want to vary it up a little bit so you don't just get caught in the
yeah,
symbol rut of stuff. Um but like we've done so I was telling Deb that so when I first got here, one of the first conversations Lane and I had was confirmation isn't really working. We need to kind of tweak it. And what they had been doing was like once a month, a night, they would get together and they would cover a topic. And it was a 2-year program. So they got roughly 18, I would guess, about months of, or like monthly meetings. So about 18 meetings.
18
Parents would be
hours of
involved in
something.
it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of tried to like look at what they had done. For me personally, it was sort of it it just seemed like I have younger kids, so I have a fifth grader and a third grader right now. And I was like trying to think of what we would appreciate. And it was like we just kind of like rhythm and building relationships.
Hmm.
And a once a month thing doesn't really do that.
Yep.
And so we actually tabled it for a year while he was like going through health stuff. It was sort of a nobody was clamoring for it. Nobody was so let sleeping dogs lie. And then I did it this year, and I made it a weekly thing, but not every week. It was we do 10 weeks in the fall, 10 weeks in the spring. We incorporate small groups for elementary, high school, adults, so that the whole family comes and not just bring your middle schooler, drop them off, and then come back. We added a meal, so we try to turn it into like a whole faith night, small group night. Um, and so kind of that structurally, we try to set it up to
Hmm.
succeed. And then the content, I actually made it a third year because our middle schoolers are sixth through eighth grade, and it felt weird to have like, do you just do seventh and eighth? But what do you do with the sixth graders? They're in middle school, but they're not included in this program. And and it just made the most sense to just include all of
Include
them.
'em.
And so this year we tackled Old Testament, 10 weeks of Old Testament in the fall. And then this spring we did 5 weeks of Creed and then 5 weeks of faith in life. And so we talked about how we do Bible study. We talked about stewardship for 2 weeks. And then we're talking next week. I'm still trying to figure out how we want to do it. I really wanted to we have some old paraments that need to get burned because they have mold. And so I thought it would be fascinating to talk about sort of how we consecrate things and then how we unconsecrate things
Hmm.
and the ideas of holiness and that kind of stuff. And what I was going to do was burn the paraments, but we're in a giant burn ban, and that seemed irresponsible. So,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
so I'm not going to
We
do that.
just keep ours here forever. That
Yeah.
seems
So
to
ours,
work
the main reason
with
we're
the
doing it
mold
is,
on them. That works for us. Yeah.
yes. So the main reason we're doing it is because they have mold, and so they were given to me, and they're put in a container, and I don't really I want to get rid of them, and so I thought this would be a fascinating conversation about how
Yeah.
we just consecrated or not consecrated, but um, commissioned our call process, our call
Hmm.
committee. And so talking about now how do we commission or
Some other
decommission
stuff.
and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So anyway,
Interesting.
um, but yeah, I've never tried AI stuff to kind of for me it's I like the idea of giving it a topic
Hmm.
and setting up the boundaries with it in terms of like 45 minutes, I have this many kids, I have, this kind of stuff, these resources available to us. And I like the idea of working through it because it, I've never really considered doing that. But like to me, my initial thought is I like that I don't just give it full carte blanche, like ownership of
Right.
it. I can
And
still
then you go
have
back
some
and tweak
ownership.
it. So, like,
Yeah.
so then it spits out this whole thing and it'll say, here's one way of doing it. And then I would say, this exercise isn't going to work because of this, or this exercise seems too much like the one, number
Hmm.
two, and then it'll say, oh, you're right. My problem is I start thinking of it like it's a human and I apologize. And like I'll say, I was telling my work friend, I said, it's ridiculous. Like I'll say, I'm sorry, but could you do it? Could you try one more time? It's like they don't care,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
or they'll say they'll say, um, I'm sorry I'm sorry you don't like what I gave, but I see what you're saying. Yes, I will do it a different way. But it really does, I don't know. I mean, it's you have to realize like it's pulling from billions of resources that structured it. And so, it's still a lot of work because you're still having to go through it and make sure that you're like, is that does that fit with my theology? Yes, but that doesn't, and sometimes I'll say, this doesn't sound very Lutheran to me. And
Yeah.
they'll go back, oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Let me throw in something. Yeah, Deb.
Just wanted to ask, do you have to if you use it again, do you have to go back in and put the parameters in every time?
No,
Or
so
does it
like
save them?
apparently it learns. So
Okay.
I've only used, I'm trying to think, I think the Claude thing I've used for maybe two different
Mm.
like classes or events or something. And it learns how scary, learns how I think supposedly, and it learns how, like, what I want, and that I'm a Lutheran and that I'm setting this up for this. But then like it'll keep it, at least in the paid version, it kept that lesson plan that I did a month ago or 3 weeks ago or whatever. And I think I could go back, that's like in my saved things, and I think I could go back to that and say, um, let's try this one more time. You did this, but yeah, I think it could continue to tweak it.
Yeah.
Like you can do it for children's sermons. Like, okay, so here's our text for this week, and I can't think of anything that makes sense. And it'll say, how about this? And what length and how old are the children that come up? Um and it feels like I'm still at the point where it feels like I'm cheating. Like I'm still I feel like I'm not doing my job if I don't know how to do this. But it takes just as much time. It's just that you're pulling from a different kind of resource
Yeah.
than, because there's not good resources out there. Like we don't have a great ELCA resource. And then sometimes, I mean, if you can, maybe you pull from something else that isn't exactly Lutheran. And I don't know, I cannot, in all the years I've done this, we've never come up with a resource that we really liked.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
um,
I think for me, my own sense of boundary, I guess, is like what you've been doing of setting up the boundaries, the parameters of is this Lutheran? And I think that's where I'm a little bit uh I I am still the ultimate like decider of that's not
oh,
really like I will tweak it,
100%.
which to me it's no different than me doing a search online and going
Hmm.
to,
Right,
the Augsburg resources and looking
right,
through stuff, and then the Methodist resources and looking through stuff, and
right.
and then like it's
It
no
just makes
different. It's
it
just doing it.
easier.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just
doing it
faster.
faster.
I think you
Yeah,
should try it. But I
yeah.
would but
So,
I would try the Claude one. To me, it's easier to work with than Chat GPT,
hmm
and it did, I don't know. I liked it better.
yeah,
And that was the one that the communications workshop people also suggested. And I may or may not keep a subscription. I don't know. I didn't even charge it to the church. Like I charged it to my
yeah,
own. I was like, I'm gonna pay the $15 myself, this one, just to see. And if it ends up being something that I think we could use, then I'll probably
yeah,
pay
yeah.
for it with church
I
funds.
think
And
in endeavor to your question, I think you probably could have a Word document that just has written down the basic boundaries that you always have because your small group is going to be the same. Your
right.
True.
other things are
And
always going to be the same. And you could probably just have the outline of it, input like the topic and the theme or the scripture and that kind of stuff to get you started so that you
yep.
don't.
And then you just copy and paste that in. And
Yeah.
you can copy and paste. I mean, I don't preach, but do you preach, Chris?
About once a quarter. Yeah.
Um, but for sermons, I've read some things about how people use it for sermons, and what I've seen and seems like a really good way to do it would be you write your sermon, and you could post your whole sermon text in and say, summarize this for a blog post,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
and that's pretty cool. And I mean, and it's going to take 5 seconds. And
Yeah.
so anything can go in. Like you could post, you can put as much um, as much in it as you want. I mean, there's not a limit on how much information goes into the document that you would post in it. But that's a good idea, Chris. I hadn't thought about doing it that way. Is just kind of have a standard. If I was doing it for a confirmation class, I would have a standard. Okay, we have this many kids. This is their attention level. This is what
Hmm.
we need. It's 90 minutes,
Yep.
which is too long. We know. Um,
Yeah.
but that's a good idea to just have it kind of ready to go to do it like that. But
Sandra, how do you get Claude? Do you just Google it
just
and
Google it.
okay,
Claude, I think it's like Claude.com, and then it's like Claude AI,
okay.
and then I'm sure
Like
there's
AUD.
CLAUDE. Let me look. But
Okay.
yes, I think that's right. Um,
Yeah, I think for me, the leadership side of like the thing that I'm not going to put on AI would be thinking about what topics and themes do we need to like cover in this time? So like I made the decision to say, because Deborah, we were talking earlier, I noticed that our kids are not real like biblically literate, which is
yeah,
normal. Like
same. Yeah.
they're sixth, seventh, eighth graders, but like struggling with their confidence of just being able to look up stuff. So like
Hmm.
I wasn't super confident that if they opened up their worship bulletin and saw the scripture that they could then go and find it.
Right.
And so we did lots of what I focused with our Old Testament was the big stories, but also not just the popular stories, but the core themes. So the core themes of promise and the core themes of creation and the core themes of sin and brokenness and how they are kind of woven together.
Hmm.
I used what I found super helpful that they actually really liked were the Bible Project videos. I don't know if
Yep,
y'all
we
use
use that.
those.
Yep.
They really liked those. In fact, that was like every time I had a video, they were like, "Oh, all right." And so I actually at one point sent to the parents and I just said, "Hey, we're using these videos. If this is anything that would ever interest you, like just know there's this resource out there." So we did that. With Creed, it's been a lot harder, but like I still wanted to cover the the stuff that's in the catechism, the
Hmm.
creed, the prayer, that kind of stuff. But for me, like, like Rich Melheim and the faith incubator stuff,
Hmm.
it's a little too dorky for me. I
Hmm.
I, I don't really
Hmm.
like it all that much. And it's a lot of fluff for what is actually covered. But I also was like, I mean, I'm bored after 10 weeks of Creed, much less a middle schooler. So most of my decisions were based around like how much. So with Creed, we did one, which was like an overview of what exactly is a creed. We did 3 weeks of like God, Son, Holy Spirit, and then we did the last week was like other creeds. So we talked about the Nicene and the Athanasian Creed, and it was like that's all I really like. I want them to get the gist of it, but I don't want to do it so long they just get bored with it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when I was talking to one of my friends who does confirmation for a long time, he had talked about how he has largely leaned into their natural curiosity of things like how do I lead a Bible study? Like if they ever wanted to lead a Bible, like when they go to
Hmm.
college, and if they ever wanted to start their own Bible study,
Hmm.
we've got to give them skills to do that. How to ask questions, how to be. He also was talking about like we want to teach them how to be the types of church members that we want adults to be. And so,
That's
people
good.
that are willing to get involved in service. And so he talked about doing a series on stewardship and service and he said largely and this is where I've kind of gone into is I condensed like Lord's Prayer into 5 weeks. I condensed Creed. I condensed some of those other ones from like a 10 week to 5 week. And with that extra time, I've added a whole lot of like faith and life stuff. So, years ago, I did a whole series on the anatomy of a church and sort of like um like some of the behind the scenes stuff, like what
Hmm.
exactly is the church council?
Hmm.
How does it,
Yeah.
like, why do we have that? Um, how does a church budget? How does a church do these things? How do
Right. That.
we, um, I even get into some of the Synod assembly stuff and social statements and like some of that structure stuff and just say, let's give them an opportunity to just like play with some stuff. But I think it would be fascinating to say, like, all right, I want to talk about this social statement that we have, but then let AI say, how would you do this? How would you
Hmm.
how would you give them,
How would you approach
permission
it?
to
Yep.
choose the format, or that kind of stuff and give them
The
some
other thing you
ideas.
can do is even say, um, what, uh, what, well, like, how did I say it? Like, what digital resources are there? Like, or like, because sometimes it would say, like, go online and find a video that helps with it or something. I'll say, no, you need to tell me what you're talking about. And so
Hmm.
like it'll and say, tell me and it suggests Bible Project, which is interesting. So
Yeah.
like that is one that, so it, and again, you have to, it wouldn't work if you don't know what you're doing,
Hmm.
but yeah, I think it is a resource that is really worth tapping into because
Yeah, that would be interesting.
it's there. Now, what I don't understand is like when you read stuff online and people say, "Well, I'm not using AI because it's harm to the environment." I don't get it. I don't really understand. I'm using it. I don't really understand how it harms the environment other than I know that it takes a lot of power to do this, but I don't really understand how it could be taking more power than me doing Google searches all day long. I don't know. Do y'all understand? I mean, you've heard this,
Yeah,
right?
I've heard that the it's sort of like the whatchamacallit, the Bitcoin farms. They take so much electricity to run,
Right.
but like you've said, I don't really understand how,
Either.
like, it's for me it's not a clear, like, obviously evil. I'm not, or not
Right.
evil per
Just
se, but
saying.
like a
Yes.
negative thing. I mean, to me it's similar to the um not getting into this conversation, topic, but it's sort of the in automotive, the fully electric versus the fully gas versus the
Right.
hybrid conversation. It sounds like we're all kind of settling into the hybrid conversation of like,
Yeah.
yes, I'm not going to give it full reign of my ministry so that I can just AI everything.
Right.
But at the same time, utilizing it a little bit, like you've said,
Right.
like it's what's the difference between doing that and it being sort of a
Good
almost
tool.
like I'm
Yeah.
sitting in a room with a ministry team here and saying,
Right.
all right, let's throw out some ideas for how we want to do this, and you're just using computing power to do that
And
versus
that's
the
that's
individuals in the
that's
room.
how I described it to someone, and I meant to say this that to me, it feels like I'm working with a ministry partner who's more creative than I am.
Hmm.
So it's like having someone who I'm really not great by myself, but my brain works way better if I can bounce ideas off someone else. And that's exactly what it feels like. It feels like I've got this other person who is really creative and has been in ministry a long time like I have and can we can bounce ideas off of each other
Yeah,
as if I'm helping that person, which I'm not. But
yeah,
that's
it feels that
anyway.
way.
it's
Yeah.
it's like one of those things that I think obviously we know this is going to change how we do the world, but for now I think it's a resource that we need to use. And as we learn more about it, I mean there's so much more that we have to learn about how it works, but
I have a question for anybody who may watch this later. I did forget to tell y'all we're being recorded, but it's no problem. Anyway, it so what is your sequence of topics? I mean, Bible, catechism, Chris, you said faith and life. What is what other things do you teach besides Bible catechism, or do you teach those two things?
Right now we have 2 years. So we brought our sixth graders into youth group, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago. And that's worked, but we still don't have them in confirmation classes. And I totally agree with what you're saying, Chris. We just haven't done it. They seem so young to, but I don't know, so do the eighth graders. So I'm not really sure if it would make all that much difference. But um, we have 1 year, traditionally, 1 year has been Bible, and 1 year has been other stuff, history of the church, um, um, creed, Lord's Prayer, um, commandments, which I don't know. I have a hard time with the commandments ones. I don't know how you handle commandments, but it's just so easy to get into law and spending weeks on the commandments. I don't know. I have some reservations there. How do you handle commandments? Do you go through?
So I haven't done that yet. So I'm in the I have 1 year under my belt of so far things are going well. But I'm sure that down the road we're going to get to sort of some okay, that didn't really go the way that I wanted it to go. As far as topics, I for me, I split up the Bible year, and the only reason I did that was because, for example, if I did this year all Bible, next year, I our incoming sixth graders, which includes my son, he won't have any of that at all. So I decided to just kind of space it out a little bit,
Mm,
just because, and my first week is always like almost like an orientation of like this is how you look up things in the Bible. This is what we mean by this. We also do a little bit of spiritual practices each lesson. So we do a little bit of Lectio Divina at the very beginning that they
mm,
actually really enjoy. We do a little bit of, I give them a blessing, like a pre-written blessing and then a pre-written prayer, and they do the prayer. Because I, just like most of our experiences, they didn't, if you ask them to fully, do it themselves, they would like freeze up and not really know what to do. And so I just wanted to give them the practice of reading something or praying or doing a final blessing at the end.
mm,
So we did so next year we're doing New Testament. Sorry, I just pulled it up and I'm reading it. We're doing New Testament, we're doing baptism for a couple weeks, communion for a couple weeks. We're doing the anatomy of the church, and then we're doing a couple topics on world religions.
mm,
And mostly like my idea with that is I want them to have an appreciation while also acknowledging that every religion isn't the same. And I think
mm.
that's what I hear a lot of people say is, well, we're just all kind of the same in the end, and it's
Yeah.
not the case. It's sort of similar to just the whole I don't see color thing when we get into race stuff. Um, there are differences, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to treat them as less than human and less than, a child of God. So like we're doing that stuff. We're doing 5 weeks on commandments, and I kind of broke it out. We're doing a little bit of church history, like major eras, major denominations, that kind of stuff. And then we're doing a little basics on like church year, some other faith and life that I haven't quite decided what to do yet. Um, I think for me, like I'm trying to find that balance of I don't want it to be entirely middle school like interest led because you don't know what you don't know. And so I want to sort of give them some things that they don't know. At the same time, I want them to have a little bit of ownership on saying, like, for example, let's talk about history, but what are you interested in? Like,
Hmm.
and then I can figure out how to, teach that stuff. Um, so like I don't know, after I did a trip to Israel and I did a trip to Greece and Turkey Israel was 2 years ago, Greece and Turkey was this year. And I thought, I wonder if I could use Google Earth and we might talk about,
Hmm.
different things, but actually take them into like, all right, here's where the historical site and this is what it looks like.
That's
Kind of
cool.
stuff. And just kind of talk about that stuff. I think trying to find that balance of stuff is what we're doing. I think um what has seemed to be the most interesting first or most I think when I think about what's going well, I'm trying to gauge like it's not so much their energy level per se as much as I want it to sort of spur into questions and them talking about things. And most of it has been around like how to stuff, giving them the tools to sort of be disciples a little bit rather than just giving them information, if that makes sense. Um, that's kind of what we've been doing. But like I
And you
said,
said,
I'm still learning. This could go well, it could go terribly.
and you
Um,
said families come, and so it's
so we have so at our faith thing, when I'm actually in the confirmation class, it's just me and the youth.
okay.
Um, I I may change down the road, like some of the families, like parents wanting to come. I've seen the mentor model where they're connected, like other adults are in there. Um, I I think for me it was mostly I wanted to give parents an opportunity to do their own, like to engage in their own small groups if they wanted to. Mostly because um I push back a little bit on I think it's important to have parents be influences for the kids in the midst of life. But when they come to church to engage with the whole community. And I don't want it to become parent based at church too, if that makes sense. Like I want our youth to know generations of people, not just their parents.
So do
Um,
you have, so when you're having your class, the parents are in a small group of their own, and does somebody lead that, or do they lead it
yeah,
themselves?
yeah. So we have a couple people. We have a person here that wanted to teach a class on Revelation. So
Oh,
like, and we don't force them to do anything. They're adults. Um, some of them just kind of hang out and connect. But we had a person that wanted to do a small group on Revelation. So we're doing a 10-week study on Revelation. In the fall, we had a few weeks where they literally just walked our parking lot and they just connected. So we would give them like some conversation topics.
hmm.
And then they did 4 weeks on Philippians where they just did a chapter a week. Um, we have a group that is in December, we do a kind of a walk through nativity we call Journey to Bethlehem. And it's kind of grown each year with like set design and costumes and script writing and all that kind of stuff. And so that group decided, why don't we turn it into a small group? And we did like 3 weeks of talking about the script and script decisions and
Hmm.
rewriting stuff
Well, that's cool.
and then we did a couple weeks on costumes and looking at what historically would be accurate based on what did people wear back then and having
That's
conversations about
interesting.
that stuff. So, I mean, we've tried a couple things and
Now, is
some of
this
it's
on
worked.
Sunday nights?
It's on Wednesday nights.
Wednesday nights.
I thought it was going to be Sunday evenings, and most of our middle school families said actually Wednesday nights is better for us. Um, I don't know if it was dealing with like them getting ready for the week or what, but I offered Wednesday or Sunday evenings and Wednesday evenings and they said Wednesday evenings was better. And we've had good participation from those families.
How do you deal with it? Like, so during Lent, do y'all have services on Wednesday nights?
Yes. So we
So,
did in the fall what seemed to work better. In the fall we did our meal first um for 30 minutes and then we did an hour small groups. Um because we had Lenten service, we were trying to figure out how best to do it. And our tradition here had been that the Lenten service was like 6:15, 6:30, so that the choir could just stay and do choir. So we switched it and did small groups first, and then people can dish up food, and then we set up tables in our sanctuary. So they take the food into the sanctuary, and then we do our Lenten services in the sanctuary. It's not quite as well, worked as quite as well, but it's not because of that. It's mostly because having the meal first gave people a time frame, like within 30 minutes to get here to get some food, and then we started small groups at 6. And now what's happening is I'm starting small group at 5:30, and then one will trickle in at 5:40, and then another one will trickle in, and it hasn't been as smooth
Just
per
right.
se.
And then
So
when do you have the service? When is your Lenten services? At
6:30.
7? At
So
6:30.
I think what we will do next year is my recommendation is going to be to do the meal, bump the service earlier, and to do small group after the service.
Mm.
Um, and with our elementary kids, because they've been in school all day, because they just did a service, we largely just go to like playing and some playground time, some game time. We shorten the small groups a little bit just because they're tired and they've been
Yeah.
in school. Um, but
I'm sorry, do other
no, no, go
family
ahead, Deborah.
do other families come in for that, or is it just your families involved in confirmation?
We have adults that come,
Okay.
and they'll just come for small group. We have because we've beefed up our elementary stuff as well, it means that basically all the kids have a thing to do. Um, the one that's struggling the most is high school, and it's COVID related, and they're not connected over the last years, 2 or 3 years. So
Yeah.
they don't like our high school group, their friends aren't at church, their friends are at school. Um, their primary friends. And so the hope is that the elementary kids are sort of building those friendships. The middle school are, and so then it will move up.
Our high
Um,
schoolers, yeah, our high school is pretty dead. But
yeah,
middle school's doing great, but high school is
yeah.
really suffered a lot.
It's it's schedule related. It's lots of
Yeah.
things related. I know that we've talked about it, but I think what people have appreciated, like the feedback that we've gotten here has been it's hard to say no because the food is prepared for you. So like that's the big thing is like it's a meal that we don't have to cook. So that if I'm tired and I don't really feel
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah.
going,
So
that
logistically, who does that? Because we struggle with that.
the meals
Uh-huh. Do you
I
have
did,
somebody?
I formed we have two cooking teams of like 4 people, 3 or 4 people. And so I do one week where I do pizza and it's easy. And then I do one week where it's cooking team A and they are in charge, and then another week of cooking team B. And so each of them, they know the schedule ahead of time. And so each team cooks 3 times. Um, and then they're off for a couple months, and then they'll cook 3 times, and then they're off. So part of
Good.
the reason we only did 10 weeks here, 10 weeks there is if you do the whole school year, it's like 32 weeks, and it's just a lot. So we just decided let's maybe if we shorten it, and it is like next week is our last one, and like I personally am like
Everybody's ready.
I'm ready for the finish line here.
And so when people come and eat, do they pay?
It's free will donation. So but yeah, I mean people pay. So
Do you cover your bases? I'm just
yeah,
curious.
for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean a
Kind
little
of
bit, but
simple
we have a little
meals,
bit of money in our budget to kind of
pastas and simple meal kind of
Mhm.
things. And
Yeah. We'll do like the pizzas, it basically boils down to about $3 or $4 a person.
mhm.
Um when we do other meals, like we have a couple people that smoke, like have smokers and stuff like that. And usually pulled pork is pretty cheap,
Mm,
to
good
cook.
idea.
And so we'll have a couple
Easy.
people that will say like, I'll cook it and bring it up and then you can just throw it in the oven. And so we'll do that.
Hmm.
And then the cooking team is just in charge of sides and that kind of stuff. But a lot of them also have not turned in receipts because they're like, no, this is our service.
Mhm.
We'll
We'll get
so
that.
like we've done well with it. They've covered it, and our budget has covered it. I think for us post COVID, it was like the meal time relationship time is gold.
Yeah.
And so trying to pair them together where like come for learning but also come for food and relationship time.
How many
Um,
people do you have at the Wednesday meals? I'm just curious.
40-ish. And we'll have like I mean my confirmation group is 5 or 6 and our elementary group is just as big as our confirmation. Um, we have 5 or 6 people and I have a team of 4 or 5 people that teach elementary. I teach middle school, but the idea is when we have a cult pastor here, he or she and I will kind of team do it.
Yeah.
Um, and then
How
I
do
have a
you do
couple.
Sunday school or no Sunday school? Do you
We
do Sunday school?
do. It's bad. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that the biggest struggle we have right now. I don't know if you saw the Todd Bugler post this morning. I guess he's giving a conversation about um si- burning issues and children, youth, and family ministry,
Hmm.
and a lot of it is they suggested he was asking like, do you have any suggestions for what I ought to cover? And I think yeah, the biggest thing is like Sunday school as we've traditionally taught it is just not something that families really want to come to, and but we just don't have any answers yet. We don't
Yep.
really have
We're not there yet.
yeah, and I don't know. That's one of those that I have on my kind of list of like I'm gonna have to tackle in the next year or two because it's not it's being um sort of supported and uplifted by some older adults that are deeply passionate about it. And but without their energy, I don't know that it would
Yeah,
have
it's
much.
hard because like if we were to take away kids' Sunday school, which people aren't really supporting, then you do have some adult classes that still want to meet. And so what do you do with the kids if there are
Yeah.
some adults who yeah, it's not really that everybody wants it to end at the same time. And so that's kind of hard. So
Mhm.
yeah, when we came back after COVID, one thing that we did was we shortened our services were at 8:30 and 11, and when we came back now they're at 8:30 and 10:30, so we only have an hour between the two services, so really we only have 45 minutes for Sunday school time, which has helped actually because it
Yeah.
was like it's just not very long, and it helps with teachers, and you can't get anything done, but at least it's at least it's not a full hour of or
Not getting anything done.
of not getting anything done. Exactly. Or
Yeah.
people just coming so late.
Yeah.
People would show up at 10 anyway when the class would start at 9:45. So this anyway, I think it seems
Yeah. I
yeah, that's
almost
interesting.
I almost wonder if, 30, 40 years from now, we're going to be looking at worship where you actually throw in 15 to 20 minutes of faith formation stuff in the middle
Yeah.
of the service, like during the word portion,
Yeah.
where you
Well,
do the
I think that
sermon and
happens
then
some
break
places.
up and do some small group stuff to then come back and do the rest of the worship service and
Yeah.
that and like it becomes incorporated within worship as opposed to
A
worship,
separate time.
Sunday school worship kind of
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and we know early church days, that is what I mean, it wasn't like worship like we know now. So, I
mhm,
mean, yeah, this
yeah.
is well, and campus ministry models that some too. I don't know if you know, Jesse Caniff Coon is the
Mhm.
campus ministry person at USC. He and his family are members here, and so we sometimes attend their services over there, and that's it's a way more fluid service and learning and worship together, and
Yeah.
kind of cool. Yeah.
It sounds like something that we would try like over a summer and just say, you
Yes.
know what, everybody's kind of cool with trying something different.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Let's just see what happens. And then between services just becomes more of a social, which is already largely what it is. Like people are more
Hmm.
interested in coming to
Yes.
hang out and chat. So
Yeah.
yeah, it'll
Okay.
be
Sorry.
No, no, go ahead, Deborah.
No, you finish.
Oh no, I was good.
I have one more question about confirmation, and that is, what do you do with those children who um are there because they're made to be there, sometimes by grandparents, who want this to happen because it's a ritual. What do you do with those children who don't have com, who but still want to be confirmed, or who don't come at all and
We
want to be
haven't really
confirmed?
had like the the kids who are in our program right now. Now I've been here for 15 years, so it's varied a lot over the years, but I don't think we have any of those right now that are not involved in the church, but or not very peripheral, but want to be confirmed. We certainly over the years have had a few who at the end decided they weren't going to be confirmed. I can think of a couple of kids who said, "This really isn't what I believe," and we were like, "All right, then you shouldn't be. Let's not have confirmation, and we'll continue to pray that at some point in your life you decide, the Holy Spirit continues to work on you, and we will hope that you will still continue to worship with your family." And so that we haven't had a whole lot of that recently. We used to require a week at camp. We used to require a week at Lutheridge as part of our instruction, that it was 2 years in the classroom and then 1 week of confirmation camp at Lutheridge. And really, you could, or my early days here, really, like, you weren't going to get confirmed if you didn't go to camp. And now we have probably a quarter to a third of the group that goes to camp in the summer for confirmation camp, and the rest do not, and we get on with our lives. I mean, we just don't, it just got to be a struggle and a fight, and we weren't willing to do it. And so, Chris, it used to be that a lot of the congregations in North and South Carolina were part of these clusters that would be camp formation clusters that were at Lutheridge and some at Luther Rock. And it was very highly pastor led, and mostly a bunch of men who had been buddies forever, and even when they would change churches, they would stay with cluster number one and would plan it together. And it was good. I mean, it was not, I'm saying mostly men just because that's what it was at the time, but it was I think it worked well for when it worked, but then that all kind of fell apart during COVID as well. And um, there's just not. I think there might be one cluster that still functions at Lutheridge, but um, that's
Yeah.
just, they have two programs up there now. But and we tell our kids they could go to either one. We have a lot of kids that go to camp, that go to Lutheridge, but some choose, like they'll say, "No, my seventh grader's not going to go to confirmation camp. They're going to music week." We're like, "All right, great,
Yeah.
go to music week."
Yeah.
I mean, so there's not. How about you? What do you have any that
Yeah.
are just kind of there for the ride?
I think we have some, like I know one family that the oldest did this. Now two of the younger kids are middle school age, and they will most likely do it. Um I don't know if it's right or wrong. I have erred around, I guess the way I view it is confirmation is largely about them taking responsibility. Now whether or not they want to be given a toolkit for that responsibility is up to them. And
Yeah,
so I see confirmation as the toolkit that we're giving them. But if someone shows up on confirmation Sunday and wants to be confirmed, I'm not gonna,
yeah.
outwardly, I'm not going to say no to them. But I will inwardly think,
You don't have what you
you're not,
need.
you're kind of being set up to struggle, but maybe
Yeah.
that's good. I don't know. I think like one of my historically, I've the benefit of I've done this over 20 years now, so I have history to look back on, and some of my um the youth that have the most active faith, I didn't even meet until they were in high school and they had no confirmation experience
Right,
whatsoever. So
right,
I have a hard time saying like that that's absolutely central, crucial
right.
to
I
active
agree.
faith. So I think I have tended to be on that, but also I don't rescue people, and I think there's natural consequences, and so
Mhm.
I'm not going to bend over backwards. For example, I told the group early on, this is when we're doing confirmation. I'm not going to be adapting lessons to send home to you every week, and but like, no, this is that's not a good use of my time. That's not a
Right.
good like. You
No,
can make the decision, and I will like you're adults and y'all can make those decisions. So if you decide to do whatever activity on Wednesday nights and not do confirmation, that's fine. But I'm not gonna then spend a couple hours of my life adapting
having
something
a,
for you.
right, having a
Um,
take home, right.
so yeah, so I that's kind of where I've now we haven't really had those dilemmas at the same time. By the time they're confirmed, we may have a pastor in place and they may have a different view of things that I will maybe defer to them. But I've come from one church that had like, 80% of small groups and you needed 20 sermon notes and you needed this and this.
Mhm.
Um, I believe in like talking to them and saying there's a reason that I would recommend you do these things.
Right. It's
And
for
if you
your
don't
own
do
good.
these
Right.
things, there are like downsides. So like you don't go to camp, well, there's a good chance they won't feel as connected to other kids. And
Hmm.
as long as you're aware of that, that's fine. Um, but I'm not gonna like turn them away just because
Right.
to me
I agree.
the downside to a kid that feels rejected seems a little extreme. I mean,
No, I
I
agree.
don't know of anyone that uh refuses to baptize or refuses to commune, even though we know they don't really. So it feels a little, I don't
Well,
know,
there's a grace involved that,
yeah,
yeah,
overly
that's important.
legalistic. So, but
I'm,
I also like, I guess to your question, I think I've rationalized it on. I'll give them some grace, but it also doesn't mean that I'm chasing people. And I think that's what
sure.
sometimes
Well,
we do is we try to accommodate so much that it drives us insane.
yep.
Um, so yeah.
Hey, well, I'm gonna have to scoot. I have another meeting, but this
Too.
is this has been good. Thanks. I mean, I'm sorry more people didn't see it or want to talk, but it's really been helpful to me, Chris, to have somebody to.
Yeah,
You're
absolutely.
just like an AI person. I can just bounce all ideas off of. So it is good to have another deacon in the Synod because we're few and far between. And are Chris, you might be the only non-retired male deacon. Is that right, Deb?
I believe so.
All right. Holding
There
down
you
the
go.
fort.
Well,
I
welcome.
did it was funny. I did the Greece and Turkey trip, and that one was with for ELCA deacons, and it was my wife laughed because it was there were 13 of us, and it
You
was
and all the
12 women
girls.
and me.
Yeah, I
And
was gonna say
I was like, it looks like I crashed a girls' weekend.
that's so
And
funny.
the funny story I have told lots of people is when we were in Turkey, we were at one stop and a guy was talking to us and he looked at all of them and looked at me and he just goes, "Nice harem you have here." And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I
Oh,
got so
oh,
red.
so
And
embarrassing.
so yeah,
No, stop.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Well, it's welcome, and maybe
thank you.
we'll touch at you'll be at Senate Assembly this summer, I
Yep,
assume.
I'll be
So
there.
we'll try to meet in person.
And maybe we can set up some deacon Zooms once in a while and maybe,
That'd
and
be good.
and all get together and maybe get some more people and talk about different stuff.
Yep,
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
we
that's
can.
helpful.
All
Yeah,
right. Well,
thank
thank
you.
y'all.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you,
See
Deb.
you later.
See you later.
All
Have a
right.
great day.
You
Thank
too.
y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.